I'm just going to talk about the boot repair I did for one of my CV joints. So the boot ripped pretty badly. I think it was because it was living in warm weather and then it came up to cold weather. And it seemed to rip right along a seam. And I think that was partially due to the fact that someone else put the wrong boot on in the past and it was too big. And so it was all squished and it was pinching on itself. So I wanted to get a new CV boot, and it was about everywhere I looked online, a new boot was about between $30 and $50 before shipping and everything, and a new full axle, was around $80. So I ended up just ordering a new axle, but I wasn't 100% sure which part I should get because there's a few different versions online. And they're a little bit, I'm not sure because they're not actually for a Pajero per se. They're for a Montero. And it's hard to say if a Montero will always have the same axle and steering knuckle, I guess, as the Pajero. So anyway, so I called Chieftain. No luck. Called Napa. No luck. Called Canadian Tire. They had a part number for this place called Trackmotive online. And so the part number was MIA105. And they said they were going to try and order one for me, but they never got back to me. And so I called. I also called Lordco. They didn't know at first, and then I called them back, and they said they could get one for me, but it was $150. So I ended up looking online, using that part number, and I'll talk about that later. So first, I ended up repairing it instead because it wasn't going to be here for 3 weeks or so, and I used this red RTV gasket maker to repair it. Used a headlamp, which is really handy because it's nice to have two hands for this, and then the shop stuff just to clean any dirt and dust off of the CV boot because you want it as clean as possible before you put the RTV on. So you can see this is the boot. It's the passenger side upper, and you can kind of see how squished it is, and that's how I was able to do the repair I ended up doing. But the boot on here is way too big and it's squished, and so that's how it looked even before I put this gasket maker on there, and it is quite stuffed together, which I think is why it broke, because when it was turning it was just pinching and pinching. So this is just from the bottom, and same boot and everything. They put hose clamps on there, the person who did this before me, so that's great. And then this is just a heater because it's quite chilly out, and I wanted that area as warm as possible, especially for the RTV to be able to dry properly. Okay, so this is just a little illustration of kind of what I ended up doing. So like I said before, it was ripped right along the seam, right where I drew those marks. So I ended up cutting out a donut-shaped chunk of it, put RTV on both sides, and then slotted that back in there. And what I should have done probably is just put it on half, because it was only squished on the bottom side. So if I put it on half, squished it back in there, let that dry, turned it 90 degrees or 180 degrees, and then put it on the other side, squished it in there. But it worked out anyways. That's basically how I ended up doing it. I put it on the whole thing, squished it in there, and then came back a day later, turned it 180 degrees, put it on the other side, and let it just kind of sit for another day. So it's a slow fix because you have to let the RTV dry, but it worked really well. Okay, so I ended up going on Parts Avatar. My dad found this for me, and I put in, you can see here, 91 Mitsubishi Montero. So it's not a Pajero, They didn't have that option. And I because I got the part number from Canadian Tire, I knew exactly which one I needed. So they had track motive. You can see here, there's the track motive part. Now, this one thing you have to be careful about, and I saw this on a whole bunch of websites, so I knew to look for it, but here it's harder to see. You can see down here, it says with automatic transmission. And the thing is, so the part that goes into the differential is a 25 spline, and then the part that goes into, I guess, the tire, I can't remember what that's called right now, but that's a 28 spline, and this is for the automatic transmission. Now with the manual transmission, where here it says except automatic, that's what you want to look for if you have manual. They're 28 splines on both ends, and that's very important because if you get 25 on the one side and you have a manual, then it won't fit into that differential, and because you don't have enough splines on there. Yeah, so that's everything. That's the repair. I'll make another video about actually inserting the new CV, doing that all up. But that's the repair, and it's been holding really well. I drove it for probably, I want to say 50 kilometers so far since that repair. So not very far, but it's held. It's keeping the grease in and the water out, and that's what matters. All right, cheers, guys.